Come vedete anche la chiesa, l'altare è particolarmente ornato, sia appunto perché è la festa dei Santi Carmelitani, sia perché domani...
As you can see, the church and the altar are particularly ornate because it is the Carmelite saints' holiday, and because tomorrow at 10:30, Joseph, one of our theology students, will make his sacred profession. For us it is an important moment, this history, which began with Saint Teresa, is extended in time with the offer that one of our students will do in his life. This is very important, and also why I ask you to pray. Now let's try to understand why, in a school of Christianity, which is a catechesis on the basis content of the Christian life, we insert these typically Carmelite speeches, not to make some vague spirituality, but because from when we started the school of Christianity over 20 years ago, we faced all of the doctrine, the catechesis of the Church, and we continue to do so. But I can speak of the family as I speak of the Church. But when I want to specify this family, it is not that the doctrine is different. It is not that the gifts of God are different, that the things which we must take care of are different. But this family has a name, a last name, an address, a history, a tradition, and a culture in its teaching. When we use the word Carmelite Ecclesial movement, we do not want to say anything more of the Church, but a particular way of living the experience of the Church that dates back to our Carmelite saints, especially Saint Teresa of Avila, teacher and doctor of the Church. Okay. Last time I spoke of the importance of this saint in the panorama of the culture, of the deepening of what is the relationship between man and God. A mystic, blessed Charles de Foucauld, who was first a soldier, then an explorer, who went to Africa to live in the desert among the Tarang, a personality with a depth of incredible beauty, he said, Saint Teresa is one of those authors who become like the daily bread. In Letters to Friends, he wrote, you can never read too much of her or reread her too much, because there is always a set of incomparable examples and virtues, a trusted doctrine. I am also passionate to see what people who are very far away from faith, far away from Christian practice, some who do not even believe in God, what do they have to say about Saint Teresa? Kiran, with all his strangeness, was in love with Saint Teresa of Avila, and he wrote, the Spanish mystic is a divine moment of human history. And Unamuno, who was not entirely clear in his Christian position, nor religious, he said, so many people have left institutions, books. We Spanish, we have left soul. Saint Teresa applies and is valid to any institution and for any critique of pure reason. And the students know that is a work of Kant, considered a watershed of philosophy. It is nice to see how people who are far away manage to perceive a wealth that we who are near to it risk overlooking. Paul Valéry, a French symbolist poet who for 40 years manically every morning, for 2 hours, he wrote in his diary. And in his diary, he said that Saint Teresa was his favorite reading. And at one point he writes, "My life was like a home, and I knew it in such detail, and so I knew it that I almost did not see it anymore. Its regular shapes, its steps, its movements seemed those of my own body, my time, and I did not conceive other dwelling places. My soul was there, so habitually, that ultimately it was not anywhere. One day by chance, I don't know how, I touched a spring on a door, and here a secret door was opened, and I entered in a strange and endless apartments. I was shocked by my discovery. I moved in all these unknown dwelling places, such mysterious rooms of my soul, and I felt that they were my true home, the home of my soul." If one analyzes the language, it was taken completely from Saint Teresa. It was the discovery of incredible wealth after living so many years feeling empty inside. And at one point he discovers this wealth. You know, I have done a study on this, that 350 years after Saint Teresa, Kafka wrote a novel called The Castle, where he depicts a lost man, a stranger, who must be able to enter the castle where he is called. But no one wants him. No one searches for him. There are no roads. The doors are locked. Kafka describes the anguished man. What does he have to do with Santa Teresa? We know that Kafka, at some point in life, read Flemish mystics. And Kafka makes this comment. He says, "Some books give me the effect, such as a key to the unknown rooms of my castle. And when describing the situation that left a mark on his relationship with his father, on the one hand, Kafka had a problematic and complex relationship of attraction, devotion, and absolute dependence on his father. And on the other hand, of total rejection. He describes it as this. It is as if one were a prisoner and not only wanted to escape, but wanted to transform his prison into a castle. But if you escape, you cannot transform it. And if you transform it, you cannot escape." They all look like contradictions, puns, but they all say the mystery to be a human being. If I were to ask Saint Teresa to explain what she wants to say in her book, The Interior Castle, in the most elementary possible way, she would answer me, look, these are her words, look, you are not empty. You are not empty. Try to think of yourself and think about your interior. As soon as you think about your interior, you certainly think of all the organs in your body. Just like the doctors know the organs. But once you have thought about filling up of your body, that could also seem like the straw that goes in dolls, you ask yourself, what is inside of me? Perhaps you think of your feelings, of your emotions, of your desires, of your experiences, of your joys, of your torments, of your love. But inside, what is inside of you? The question ends up being the same. Who am I? This afternoon, I read an author who says, do not ask me who I am. Do not ask me who I am, because I am a together of a set of characters, a living theater, and from time to time I play all the roles. Okay. Now I will read to you the text that Saint Teresa puts at the beginning of her Interior Castle. It goes like this. Today, as I was pleading with the Lord to speak in my place, or to write in my place, I got the idea of considering our soul as a castle. You must think that Teresa lives in Castille, the land of castles, Avila, which is a city that we hope to go and see together with those who have not been there yet. A city of which Unamuno said, Avila is a diamond of granite rock, golden from the sun, from centuries and centuries of sun. This is the city of Avila. It was normal for Saint Teresa to think of castle. Allora, our soul is like a castle, then all diamond of very clear crystal, in which there are many dwelling places, apartments. And she imagines these apartments, a little Eastern Europe, where in each apartment there were gardens, fountains, water pipes. She says, as it is in heaven, because the right of the soul is a paradise, where the Lord says to find its delights. So how do you think the dwelling place should be where God is pleased to live? A God so powerful, so wise, so pure, so full of all good. I don't find anything that is comparable to the great beauty and great ability of a soul. And actually, our intelligences to perceive, they are struggling to grasp these truths as they cannot come to understand God, because He Himself claims to have created us in this image. So, to this question, who am I? What do I have inside me? Saint Teresa would respond, you are not empty, but you would not even be able to imagine with the greatest imagination the great hermosura di alma, that That is the great beauty of the soul.
Noi tradizionalmente siamo abituati a lasciare il rapporto con Dio in una vaga indeterminatezza.
This means anything infinite. This is how Teresa describes the symbol that was used in her book. Okay, let's take up again what we said the last time about how Saint Teresa sees prayer. That is the relationship with God. Traditionally, we are used to leaving the relationship with God in a vague uncertainty. We do not know very well what this relationship is. And then we say there are moments in which this relationship is made a little and is perceived, and we call these moments prayer. What do you do when you pray? I try to get in touch with God. We have just finished praying. We have been helped by the psalms, the singing, the gestures to stand up. We did an act of prayer. And we are accustomed to think of prayer as the acts of prayer. If we are good, we do these acts quite frequently. We are better, the more frequent these acts. We are less good, the rarer the acts of prayer. This is our mentality. Note that this is not true. But Saint Teresa blew away this very way of thinking about prayer, saying, the story of my life is the story of my prayer. This is not so immediate. If I were to tell the story of my life, I would begin saying, I was born on this day, the situation was this. If I think about my life, we were in a time of war, there were bombings. My grandmother was sacred once, running away, took me in her arms, and we both tumbled on the stairs. I would tell all the events. I would tell the events of my life.
Sarà stata la mamma, forse la nonna, forse il papà, non lo so, che mi ha preso in disparte e mi ha detto, guarda, il segno della croce si fa così, e sapete come si fa con i bambini, gli muovi le manine, poi magari tu sbagli e ti correggono, poi ti fanno dire le parole, te le fanno ripetere.
But those are facts. Instead, Saint Teresa would tell these facts, and all the others, from the point of view of a God who is there, who is close, that is within you, that follows you, and through what happens to you, speaks to you, and you answer to Him. If I imagine the first time someone taught me to pray, I don't remember well. It would have been my mother, have been my grandmother, have been my father. I don't know. He took me aside and told me, the sign of the cross you do like this. And then he corrected me. And I repeated the words. I don't really remember. But at that moment, through the gesture of my father or grandmother, a dialogue happened between me and God. God was telling me something. Paternally, God took care of me. And I answered. There it was obvious because it was an act of prayer, but also took care of me when my mother in the morning gave me the cup for milk that I never liked and said, make a small sacrifice. I did not know it, but it was all a dialogue with God. God would tell me things, and I answered. And when I was in school, and I wanted to be the best, there was a relationship between me and God. This is what St. Teresa understood, and it is very beautiful. If you knew to look deeply at your life, if God gave you eyes to see, And in heaven, you will be given these eyes, because paradise will be the beauty and wonder of being able to understand the whole mystery, the mystery of God, the church, relationships, affections. Saint Teresa insists on this. The first big thing she said, the story of my life is the story of prayer. You would understand the history of your life. The content of your life has been and is, in turn, the content of your prayer. My life has been and always is a dialogue with God, a desire to communicate with Him, even when I do not realize. Imagine how many people we can meet, and to whom, if you were to ask, did you say a prayer? They would reply, what? Perhaps no one has ever done it, or in any case, it has been some time that they do not do it. And yet, all day, this person has been in a relationship with God. Maybe it is a relationship from the point of view of God is silence. Silent patience, or patient silence. God waits, shows you things. He has them glimmering ahead because He expects and waits to be able to say that word that will be decisive. It is very beautiful. Life is all a dialogue with God. And then St. Teresa insists, so I am not empty inside. I am not empty inside. Life is not a look at me in the mirror. It is a closing of myself in myself, a talk with myself. Life is a presence within me, a presence with me, and for me, and I for Him, and I with Him, and I in Him. Fortunately for us, this is true, even when we neglect it.
Ho letto in un libro di racconti di fioretti che hanno, cioè nella tradizione carmelitana ci sono le opere di Santa Teresa, poi ci sono delle tradizioni tramandate da monastero a monastero che sono stati raccolti in esempi come un po' i fioretti di San Francesco, va bene? Uno che non conoscevo dice così, che quando Teresa, che era una monaca,
How it would be nice if instead of neglecting it, we acknowledged it and indulged in this.
continuamente ad uscire con alcune monache perché doveva fondare
To learn this, to acknowledge it, and indulge in it, there are the acts of prayer.
voleva dire
And I think we should do a little more often.
carri coperti come quelli di una volta
The more profound and embracing are the acts of prayer,
e c'erano anche
the more the fabric of my life as a dialogue with God stabilizes. Let me give you an example from the life of St. Teresa, and that I have only just read a few days ago.
caro coperto, dobbiamo vivere come se fossimo in comunità. E allora
Because there's always something new to learn. I read
suonava una campanella e c'era
in a book of traditions
poi c'era l'ora del pranzo, poi c'era l'ora della ricreazione, no?
passed down
Un piccolo monastero
from one monastery.
come quelli che si vede nei film degli ideali del Far West, Sicari,
These are
allora c'è
traditions, little stories, kind of like the little flowers of St. Francis.
la prima cosa che Teresa dice
When St. Teresa, who was a nun, traveled Spain and was forced out with some nuns to establish monasteries, she started monasteries, which means she was traveling in covered wagons, and these trips lasted very long, whole days, and there were risks and dangers.
voce di tutto quello che Dio ti mette attorno.
Okay, St. Teresa
La preghiera è
had taught her nuns, who of course were out of the convent, but would have to live in a wagon as if they were in a community. And St. Teresa established times for meditation, for lunch, for meditation. And practically, they had made a small mobile monastery. These covered wagons. Then one day, now there's two facts. The first thing, Saint Teresa said to her nuns, but when you pray, in silent meditation, everything there is outside, the views of rivers, mountains, trees and flowers, everything that you see, does that enter part of your prayer? For her, it was obvious that when you pray, you become the voice of all that God puts around you. You do not know, but prayer is from within and comes a voice from which you try to listen to God and to answer. But you have to involve all that is part of your life. And then she says to her nuns, today, I invite you, my sisters, to pray during this hour. Let's pray to our Father. Silence for an hour. After an hour, the nun in charge rings the bell, and Saint Teresa asks the nuns, have you finished your prayer? And they say, yes, Mother. Have you meditated on all the questions of our Father?
Perché la prima forma è l'attenzione alle parole che dici, l'attenzione a quello che la parola che dici ti suscita dentro, e cercare di intuire se il Signore sta intervenendo nella tua vita, a volte anche con una cosa casuale, però che...
And the nuns, yes, Mother, all of them. Then she looks at them and says, strange, I was still stuck on the word Father. Do you understand? Do you understand an act of prayer? What it means? Also, Saint Teresa. Saint Teresa of the child Jesus, the same thing was happening. She would stop, moved by the word Father, and she could no longer continue. She said, it is enough to say that the word Father, at the thought that God is my Father, that I am in His hands and all of my belongings to Him, I would fill up my heart with such tenderness that I am not able to continue the prayer. Do you understand how many things we have to learn? Let's make some examples. I will read. I don't know. God has given salvation in our land. And if someone asks me 1 second later, ask me, what did you read? I do not know. Because the first form is the attention to the words you say. The attention to what the word you say inspires you inside. You must try to grasp if the Lord is intervening in your life, sometimes with a random thing. However, that which is exactly what you need. There is so much education to do in this level of active prayer. But let's go back. Saint Teresa says, look at all these things are good and necessary, but let's try to make a path.
Sono mendicanti al di fuori del castello che sono loro stessi, di cui loro stessi sono padroni, e l'uomo praticamente descrive l'uomo, diciamo che è quello che
Okay, let's try to make the path.
l'uomo che si è gettato fuori come così, si è avventato al di fuori.
Make the path as if it were me, as did Saint Teresa. But it is clear that everyone has to do it. Saint Teresa says to me, look, the beautiful castle is you. You are the master of this castle. But it can happen, and it happens to many of us, that this castle seems an abandoned castle. Once upon a time, there were many of these castles uninhabited, cold, crumbling. Imagine a castle like this. You might say, it is good for nothing. But at the door of this castle outside, among the beasts, the snakes, the spiders, the vipers, there's a beggar. The beggar who is there waiting. The beggar does not know that he is the master of this castle. He is there, this poor man. Sometimes St. Teresa describes him as paralytic, like a beggar, like someone hungry and thirsty seeking help. She says, how many men do not know that they are beggars outside the castle? They are themselves, of which they themselves are the masters. Then describes the man that St. Augustine would have called the exterior man, the man who threw himself out. He is foolish beyond himself. St. Teresa says, look, you see the door off its hinges, slamming? It seems that it is good for nothing. Do you want to know what is prayer? Prayer is that door there. We think of anyone, even the worst person in circumstances, the prodigal son. Say, take this person, the prodigal son, for example, who was among the swine, when he says, the moment he says, how many servants in my Father's house have something to eat? And I look how they are, reduced. I will rise up and go to my Father and tell him. Here begins to stir in this prodigal son a dialogue with his father, who is far away. But before he even gets to him, his father, he begins to pray. Even for a need, even for a sense of total abandonment, of cold, of humiliation, of self-loathing. St. Teresa says, in any situation you find a man who begins to pray as you can, at least, and if only for fear, at least for only need, because he cannot take it anymore, because he wants to scream. When one begins to pray,
perché uno, quell'altro che diceva io sono un teatro vivente, perché uno ha messo dentro frustrazioni, uno ha messo dentro vanità, l'altro ha messo dentro orgoglio, l'altro ha messo dentro tanta stupidità. E allora quando uno tenta dire
and he goes through the castle door. A miracle begins to happen. St. Teresa remains within the story and says, that castle, cold, nasty, dirty, wet castle. Slowly it begins to get a bit warmer. And a little bit brighter. And one begins to feel a certain tenderness, to be almost home, even if it is still just the beginning. When you pass the door of prayer and begin to place oneself in motion, it's like in fairy tales of children, when there's the enchanted castle, and one enters and all the objects begin to come to life. Imagine that I was living like the prodigal son. I pass through the door. I start to pray. And St. Teresa begins to describe what will happen to you. Okay, I will quickly review these 7 dwelling places. these traditional artistic 7 dwelling places that you have to cross. In the first dwelling places, as soon as you start to get in a relationship with God, the first thing that must happen is that you want to begin to understand yourself. Who am I? How do you do it? You see what you are. Then all sorts of things happen. Because I am in a live theater. One puts in frustration. One puts in vanity. Another one puts in pride. Another one puts in much stupidity. And then one tries to say, who am I? How do they feel? How do you feel?
Persona che secondo me la prima cosa che mi mette è ma come fa Dio a volergli bene? Appunto, per Dio siamo unici al mondo, stupiti. Il primo movimento della preghiera, anche quando sei pieno di problemi, è lo stupore.
Allora, St. Teresa says that once you begin a relationship with God, you have to live in this first dwelling that is necessary to know yourself. Whatever thing that you see in yourself, good, bad, sadness, illness, every wound, whatever things come to mind, you must say this: I am what I am. I know myself a little. But I am amazed. I am amazed before the face of God that He loves me as I am. You understand? It is the first thing of prayer. First thing of prayer is to put oneself before God, to ask, what are you made of? And then the results can be greatly different. You can collect the result of being so foolish to say, I am just fine. Or though there are those that complain, I am this way and nobody loves me. But Teresa says, first, look inside yourself. Do not be afraid of what you see, whatever it is. Do not be elated by what you see, whatever it is. Remain amazed, astonished in front of this evidence. Like this I am, and there is one who loves me infinitely. Does this happen to you sometimes? It happens to me, to see some person and think, how does God love him? For God, we are unique in the world. Amazed. The first movement of prayer, even when you're full of problems, is to marvel at the fact that God loves you just as you are. First thing. Then once this first phase is overcome, and you have softened, you have warmed up, and you have been a little enlightened at the thought that God loves you just as you are, go forward and get this. And there are the second dwelling places. That this work of prayer that I have described at some point weighs you down. You do not want to do it. I find in your spiritual guide that most people get to have this experience and then they tell me, I'm tired, it is useless. And one is tempted to say, I tried.
Comincia a diventare bravo. E qui entri in una terza fase, la terza dimora. La terza dimora consiste
But I was not meant to become a saint. I am not meant to have a relationship with God. I struggle. I want to run away. I feel like I do not accomplish anything. Saint Teresa answers to you that the second dwelling place is exactly this. That you have the impression of not accomplishing anything, of not doing it, to not be suitable, to be the wrong person for this. But continue to stand there in front of your God. I tell people to say to the Lord, Lord, for 15 minutes a day I want to be with you. Then what will happen to you. Even if you yawn for all of the 15 minutes or pass it by saying, we hope it finishes, or you're full of distractions, continue, because that is your prayer. It is a struggle. You understand? One is not used to doing it and must continually fight. It's like an interior shakedown. You are not capable. You are not worthy. You are too far away. And then the mind is filled with so many useless things, with so much desire to escape from the relationship with God. Saint Teresa says, in the second phase, the struggle, the perseverance, to be there as a child, not wanting to be the one to judge. You understand? Before God, a person who prays and is full of joy and comfort, Jesus looks at him and probably says, eat your spiritual candy. And instead of one who is there, who would not want to run away, that says that this is all useless. You see, I'm in front of God, my Lord, and I will stand there with this ability to recognize God as God, despite everything. This is a difficult form of prayer. Pray having the impression of not succeeding. But go ahead. And you begin to become good. And you enter the third dwelling place. The third phase. The third dwelling place is this. You do not realize it, but it is as if, instead of the relationship with God, you begin to come in front of a mirror. Look at yourself. You look how you have become good. Look at the good things you do. You start to judge others and become a bit of a hypocrite. It is a phase. It is a phase of self-absorption. And it is a danger. Do you understand? A danger. Before you can't do it. And now you're happy because you can do it. And you can tell it. You can tell it by the fact that you acquire a certain ability to judge others and despise them. Also, this is a phase. But go ahead, go further ahead. There are 7, and we are at the 4th dwelling place. Saint Teresa says, you have to learn now to concentrate oneself before God. Start with simple things. Be careful. Do not get sidetracked. Pray by closing your eyes.
Non v'accorgete voi che noi siamo vermi nati a formare l'angelica farfalla? Anche Dante usava lo stesso esempio. E poi Teresa aggiunge anche che quando questa farfalla esce, no, dopo essere morta nel suo bozzolo, cosa fa? Va in giro per i fiori e portano un po' nei fiori.
How you normally pray. But please be careful. Think of a child. You pick him up. And you put him on a wall. In front of him, there's the father, and the father says, come on, jump, come to me in my arms. At first, the child, he has a little fear. Then he concentrates all of himself, because he has to find energy, and then he launches himself. This is a small example. This is what we have to learn to do with God. I do everything. I collect myself. But then I know, Lord, in the end I have to take you in your arms. And then you learn this form of prayer in which at some point it is not more important than what you do. But it is important to say to the Lord, pick me up in your arms as I am. Let me throw yourself on you. And then St. Teresa arrives at the fifth dwelling place. She invents and makes up this beautiful example of the silkworm working, spinning silk that becomes a cocoon. And the cocoon is like a house of gold. In this house of gold, the poor silkworm dies, and everything emerges. It comes out, the butterfly. St. Teresa says, it is like this. Jesus for us is like if we were to say, everything I do, I must serve to enter the house of gold, which is the living Jesus. I must say to Jesus, I need that all of me to die. That is too human, too old, too unsuitable, too mediocre. I want to live for you. Do you understand? He said, Dante in the Divine Comedy, you were not born to live like brutes or arrogant Christians. Let me find it. Let me find the test of Dante.
Soprattutto con tutto ciò che ti fa soffrire, con tutto ciò che ti dà problema, con tutto ciò che a volte ti ferisce, parlo degli avvenimenti, può essere una malattia, può essere una situazione difficile, può essere un amore umano che non si realizza,
He said,
può essere un fallimento, può essere l'esame andato.
You were not born to live like brutes or arrogant Christians. Do you not realize that we are worms, born to develop into the angelic butterfly? And so St. Teresa also adds that when this butterfly emerges, after being dead in her cocoon, she goes around to pollinate flowers. The butterfly is the hope of flowers. So a person who at one point is as if he enters in Jesus and wants to be able to say that he is his life. If I could die, but what I want is for you to give me your life, such a person becomes capable of doing good to all around him. And then we arrive at the dwelling places. The sixth and seventh, the central room where Jesus is nearby. And human beings, there are the spiritual engagement and the marriage. There's only one thing that should give us a lot to think about. For we men, engagement is this beautiful moment where we love each other, we get to know each other, we feel much tenderness, and the problems arrive in the marriage. But St. Teresa says that in the interior life, it is quite the opposite. In the engagement, you have to learn to love Jesus and to tell him, I choose you. I choose you, just like a young woman chooses the groom. And all of the tragic trials happen all at this time. Because you have to ask yourself, did I truly choose Jesus? Anything could happen to me in any situation without ever getting anything? Do you understand? In marriage, then you have to promise, I choose you forever. But in the spiritual life, it is not like in our small human questions where we say, we are together, everything is good, then we'll see. There is all the time love. That is the time when you, with everything that happens to you, especially with everything that makes you suffer, with everything that gives you problems, with everything that hurts you, and I mean an illness, difficult situation, human love that is not fulfilled, could be a failure, a test that went wrong. You, with all the dramas of your life, sometimes even the most tragic,
come si abbandonavano, l'umiltà con cui erano lì. E diciamo, ma può accadere anche una persona che subisce una disgrazia, cioè quello che Santa Teresa chiama fidanzamento, no? Non è il nostro, i nostri
the tragic parts in life, in the end, you are in yourself. There you suffer. And from that point of view of your prayer, the problem is, Lord, nothing can separate me from you. Nothing. Between me and you, nothing can be wedged. No betrayal. And many times we sing, who shall separate us? Imagine an existence. An existence, there are people who have not had a great spiritual life. But there are these people who have not had a great spiritual life. But life has led them into situations so painful, so all-encompassing. I remember a mother. This mother, that the doctor told her that she was pregnant, that the child would be stillborn, and that the 9 months of pregnancy were waiting for an unimaginable and this person, she's in front of an unimaginable human tragedy. She did not have anything, if not to say to the Lord Jesus, I trust you, I entrust to you as I am. And these people suddenly find themselves in the highest degree of spiritual life, not because they did who knows what achievement, but because they found themselves in these situations.
Siamo riusciti ad avere il dono di una delle più grandi attrici italiane oggi, che è la Pamela Villoresi, quella che avete conosciuto quando ci abbiamo fatto su Giovanni Paolo II, che ha preparato, sta preparando, facendosi con la... c'è dentro tutta una...
I will repeat, I've found these people. And these people, not very spiritual, and all of the sudden, through their problems, and these type of people, I have the impression to find myself in front of holy people for how they reacted, for how they abandoned themselves, for the humanity with which they were there. This engagement to Saint Teresa is not our spiritual smothering or caresses. She says, you have to face life with everything that can happen to you, and saying to Jesus, nothing can ever separate you from me. Look for a young girl or a young boy to say, I lose something very dear to me. I lose a love. I lose a chance because I do not want to betray the Lord. For Saint Teresa, this is the spiritual engagement, is to be put in a situation where what in marriage is promises oneself, I'll take you forever, you experiment it and say yes for always. And what we call marriage for Saint Teresa is this. Jesus tells her, the problem between you and me, it was resolved. Now we have become one thing. Now I will take care of you. You do not have to think about what will happen to you. I will think about it.
Non ho più niente al mondo che Dio. Ma non lo diceva come una che si chiudeva in se stessa, triste, lo diceva con una energia e una voglia di riabbracciare tutto il mondo.
You will care about my things and I will take care of what belongs to you. Teresa calls this the mystic marriage to the person. It no longer matters to protect oneself, to guard oneself. But what matters is all that is his. Saint Teresa gets to say, I would accept to stay in this world for all of eternity if I could bring one person to Jesus. For Saint Teresa, spiritual marriage is when the two exchange gifts. All that is mine is yours, and all that is yours is mine. Saint Teresa in the interior castle describes this story. The conclusion?
Sapendo che ha a che fare con Gesù direttamente, capite? Noi abbiamo bisogno di questa profondità, di questa totalità per capire che cosa dobbiamo annunciare al mondo. Il Carmelo nella Chiesa ha avuto questo dono di guardare le cose alla massima profondità possibile. E quando le cose sono guardate alla massima profondità possibile, la caratteristica è questa, non sono cose così soltanto per i migliori, sono per tutti. Il massimo della democrazia da un punto di vista spirituale è nel massimo del rapporto con Dio, perché lì vedi che cosa Dio può fare con ogni creatura, anche con la più debole. E ogni creatura, anche la più lontana, ha bisogno che qualcuno gli mostri che cosa Dio può fare se uno soltanto gli dice di sì. Teresa ha insegnato questo nella Chiesa.